Welcome back, everyone. Today we are taking a closer look at something that has become almost unavoidable in education, positive psychology. You've seen it in professional learning, wellbeing frameworks, and probably a few glossy posters around your school. No doubt it's often presented as the key to improving student wellbeing, resilience, and engagement. But once you start digging into the research, the picture becomes far more complex. Positive psychology isn't the neat, unified field it's often marketed as. And when its ideas are placed alongside the relational, cultural, and systemic realities of actual schooling, the tensions become hard to ignore. So, in this episode, we're going to unpack what contemporary research actually tells us. We'll explore the conceptual foundations of positive psychology, the methodological cracks that often get overlooked, and the implications for those of us working in real classrooms with real students, not hypothetical ones in controlled studies. And then we will bring all this into the Australian context, looking specifically at ACARA V9 and the personal and social capability strand. Because if we're going to talk about well-being, and we absolutely should, then we need to talk about it honestly. As you're listening, I want you to hold one question in mind. Whose well-being practices are we promoting, and whose realities might we be overlooking? Let's start with the foundations. F. Clydes and Murato, back in 2013, described PP as a model centered on subjective well-being, self-regulation, and meaning-making across one's lifespan. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. They acknowledge that well-being is dynamic and multifaceted, which aligns with what we see in classrooms every day. But even with that complexity, well-being is still framed as something that lives inside the individual. It's about mindset, emotional regulations, and personal meaning. This becomes even clearer when we look at school-focused models like Noble and McGrath's Prosper framework from 2015. Prosper translates PP into schooling language: positivity, strengths, purpose, resilience. These ideas are appealing and accessible, giving teachers a shared vocabulary. But here's the catch. They also risk oversimplifying the socio-ecological conditions that shape students' well-being. They focus heavily on the individual that they can unintentionally ignore the broader realities such as family stress, cultural identity, community context, systemic inequity, school climate, and of course, the relational dynamics that actually drive and sustain well-being. So as educators, we have to ask, if well-being is framed as something students must cultivate within themselves, what happens to the structural factors outside of their control? Because when we overlook those, we risk placing responsibility and sometimes blame back onto the child. More recent research makes these tensions even clearer. A 2025 review by Ghajarieh and colleagues examined the positive psychology interventions most commonly used with adolescents. Things such as gratitude journals, reminiscence tasks, movement-based activities, and the best possible self-exercise. These are the same strategies we see in many wellbeing programs marketed to our schools. But here's the crux, the underlying issue. These interventions are almost always studies in westernized individualistic contexts. They rarely account for the broader pressures shaping young people's lives. Academic competition, social inequity, digital overload, and rising global distress. This can be contentious as it doesn't align with a shared understanding. As we aim to offer individual strategies that focus on strengths and think this way ideologies, without addressing the nuanced challenges that students face, is without a doubt deeply systemic. What happens when we teach students to regulate their emotions but don't address the conditions causing the distress? Now let's look at the methodological issues because this is where things get really important for educators. Across the research, several patterns emerge. A heavy reliance on self-report measures. These are useful but limited, especially with adolescents. Short-term outcomes. Many of the studies measure effects over weeks as opposed to years. And weird samples. Yes, you heard that right. Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic populations often dominate the evidence base. A 2014 child development study illustrates this perfectly. It offers valuable insights but is based entirely on a middle-class sample. When we generalize from such narrow demographics, we fall into the trap of limitations and cognitive bias. We risk overlooking the realities of culturally diverse, rural, or marginalized students. Another issue is conceptual overreach. Ingman's 2025 application of the PERMA model to adventure education stretches positive psychology framework onto existing practices without strong empirical grounding. And this happens often within positive psychology concepts, as they are mapped within programs simply because they fit rhetorically. This tells us something critical, that translating positive psychology into real educational settings requires a far more crucial reflection that we're often encouraged to do. It demands awareness of the broader of the Petzl dynamics, political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors that shape schooling. Now let's talk about something central to well-being, but often lacking in research: teachers' emotional lives. Ma et al. Highlight how emotional labour, especially surface acting, can perpetually lead to burnout. Many teachers know this experience too well: the guide to staying upbeat, maintaining calm through chaos, and essentially holding it together even when their own emotional state is stretched thin. This complicated assumption suggests that teachers can simply just model positivity. But well-being isn't just about strategies, it's about conditions. At what point does the expectation to be endlessly optimistic become an ethical burden? When positivity becomes performative, it distorts how well-being is embedded in curriculum and school culture, and it can limit how teachers navigate the vast emotional demands of their diverse learners. Research consistently shows that well-being is relational and shaped by context. Ng and Sun demonstrate that emotional vocabulary and empathy grow through authentic shared interactions, not isolated strategies. Wigglesworth et al. Reinforced that cell programs only work when embedded in supportive school climates. Rubtsov and Ulanovskaya highlight that well-being develops through social participation, while Mang et al. Show that emphasizing strengths can unintentionally reinforce hierarchies when children associate status with exceptional ability. In the context of the digital space, Taba et al. Remind us that adolescents now build self-efficacy through online discourse, meaning well-being data must now be critically analysed with the awareness of digital inequity and online influence being key players to this concept. How do we teach well-being in a world where identity is shaped as much by digital culture as by school culture? There are some implications for Akara V9 personal and social capability. The PSC framework focuses on self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management. PP can support these areas, but only when used critically and contextually. Self-awareness and self-management. Positive psychology strategies can build emotional literacy, but emotions must be understood alongside systemic pressures. Social awareness and social management. Relational pedagogy is more effective than individualistic interventions. Dialogue and collaboration should inform and lead such initiatives. Ethical and intercultural understanding. Students need opportunities to critique wellbeing frameworks and explore how culture, digital life, and social conditions shape emotional experience. Critical and creative thinking. Students can analyze wellbeing messages in media and school programs and ask who benefits, what assumptions exist, and how inequity shapes outcomes. So where does this leave us as educators? Positive psychology offers helpful language and strategies, but only when educators approach it critically and contextually. Without reflection, positive psychology can overlook the systemic pressures that shape school ecosystems. However, with a relational, ecological, and culturally responsive framework, schools can contribute meaningfully and purposefully to how we understand and support our own well-being and our students. Ultimately, wellbeing is more than a conventional program delivered to students. It is something we co-construct intentionally, ethically, and with a great awareness of the world in which our learners are navigating.